Well, good morning. This is Susan Santiago, and thank you for joining me this morning on Pieces of Peace. I have two very special guests lined up today, and so let's start with Mr. Jim Cisco. 2 years ago, I had the honor of interviewing Jim Cisco here on Pieces of Peace, and he's the founder and president of ENODO Global, a risk management firm that fills a gap in existing risk portfolios by addressing social risk. This morning, Jim is going to discuss the current situations in St. Louis, Baltimore, and Chicago, and the growing divide between communities and police. Good morning, Jim. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Good morning, Susan. It's a pleasure to be back on Pieces of Peace.
Very good. And Jim, what is the situation, and how is ENODO Global addressing it in these three major cities? And I believe there was another one too that you're working on, another area. Was it Los Angeles?
There's a lot in going on. There's in Delaware, Los Angeles, Dallas. Mm-hmm. So it's not isolated events in particular urban areas, but we see that it's happening across the country in different locations in urban environments and even non-urban environments.
So what is the major premise that exists in these areas that brings ENODO Global into it, and what is the work that you are doing as a result of the conflict that has arisen or may the potential for it?
So I think it's our approach that really differentiates us from other either consultants or firms that or service providers that come in with solutions. I don't want to be critical of other organizations or firms or individuals. I think the work they're doing, they're just been unsuccessful. If you look at Chicago, for instance, it's historically high homicide rates. In Baltimore, same thing. And they've been spending millions and millions of dollars on different projects and initiatives, and yet the results speak for themselves. I think that's because the approach they take or the models that they try to implement aren't really focused at where the problems lie, and the problems really lie in the cities, in the neighborhoods, and in the populations that live in those areas. So our approach is radically different in that we focus everything from a population perspective, which allows us to really come up with some very unique insights and findings that really help us create either engagement strategies, communication strategies, or programs to reduce the social tensions that drive the unrest.
Do you use a lot of sociological studies or sociologists in coming up with information about the diversity of a population with whom you're going to work or study?
Not really. No, not really. And the reason why is the methodology that we employ looks at or focuses on identity. And the whole premise is if you can understand somebody's identity, you can shape and influence their behavior. And if you allow me to give you a quick example, I'll show you how it works very effectively.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you have a fireman and a lawyer, and they're standing on a corner. And in a building behind them, a window breaks and flames come out the window, and you hear screams. You're the fireman. What do you do?
Of course, you go to the rescue.
All right, you're a lawyer. What do you do?
You start counting the money that you're going to make on this lawsuit.
Exactly.
On this lawsuit in your head.
Yeah, exactly.
Potential.
So the idea is, and we prove it time and time again, is that if you can understand somebody's identity, you can shape and influence their behavior. So when we go into an environment, the first thing we try to do or attempt to do is understand the different identities that exist within communities or within neighborhoods or within in a population or society. And it's very simple when you understand it because individuals aggregate or congregate with like individuals, and those are the building blocks for our societies. And when you're able to look at the different identity layers and then find out which identity layers are the most dominant, then you can create the programs and the strategies and the narratives that actually connect with individuals on a personal level.
And Jim, how do you come up with, analyze these identities? do you use a computer?
Well, it's interesting you asked that. I mean, today everybody is in a rush for a technical solution. Everybody throws data analytics and big data at problems, and we have a saying in the company that data only gets you to the wrong answer faster. It really is a combination of using the methodology, employing the methodology with data analytics. So what we do is, and I think your next question is like, what information to use. We rely heavily on social media, but we use all types of data, structured and unstructured data, to inform our analysis.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And identity is so powerful. It's so powerful in conflicts and conflict resolution. Wouldn't you agree on that?
Identity is responsible for the majority of ethnic, religious, and social conflict throughout the world. And people get upset with me when I say geopolitics is dead, and I really believe it is dying, because we just conducted an analysis and looked over the past 3 years. More political and business leaders have been removed from office than in the past 30 years combined. And this isn't, by chance or happenstance. And we're looking at why these events occurred, and we look at social media and the impact they have. But it's how social media is shaping public perception and allowing people to have more insight and understanding and have a voice. And one of the little catchphrases that we have in our recent analysis is riots are the voice of the protests, and riots are the voice of the unheard. So in a democratic society, or in a political, or where your political representation is supposed to create change and is ineffective, people use protests and riots as their voice. And
using social media and the internet in general, Jim, wouldn't you agree that the world is becoming smaller, because we are connecting with so many diverse individuals, countries, ways of life, cultures?
Yeah, yes and no. We are becoming more, we're communicating with more individuals around the world, but it's also building, it's isolating people. It's building, or creating animosity within different groups. So if you look at what's happening across our society in the United States, the polarization that's happening between different ethnic groups, between different minorities. Even if you look at what's happening in Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter in policing, the polarization between communities and police is greater now than it's ever been. But if you understand the basics of policing, it's protect and serve. But yet, for a multitude of reasons, there's actually a divide that's being created between the police and communities.
And Jim, is there at this time, to your knowledge, or how would you offer to educate the police officers across our country? And I know there are programs that teach diversity, but do you think we're doing enough to educate them on the diverse cultures with whom they're dealing?
I don't. It's funny. I was at home this weekend, and one of my good friends is a retired police officer, and we talked about this on a run. And there's a lot of training out there, and is it the right training? I tend to disagree. There's some very good training, but there's some training that is really a very high level that doesn't allow you to understand how to apply it in a real world scenario. And we understood this as a problem, and one of the things we did was we partnered with Texas A&M, and we created the first ever online training course for first responders to help them understand, the environments that they're operating in and some of those challenges that they'll face. And it's been approved and accredited in 6 states in only 3 months.
That is awesome.
Yeah, we're doing a good job at that. But it isn't just training alone. It goes way beyond just training. Because at the end of the day, there has to be a very coordinated, comprehensive strategy that applies 3 basic pillars one being a communication strategy, the other being an engagement strategy, and the next being programs and initiatives that are all coordinated. And that's the big takeaway I learned from Chicago and from Baltimore is you have a ton of people trying to do the right thing, and you have all these efforts that are ongoing, but they're not coordinated and they're not captured in a comprehensive, integrated strategy.
And how would you approach coordinating such a vast entity such as the police departments across the country?
You can't. They all have, and this is the problem, they're all very nuanced in the challenges they face. So you can't take a comprehensive national strategy and hope that it has an impact at the local level. Each of these, local challenges need to be addressed individually. However, you can aggregate different locations to come up with findings and recommendations to inform a national strategy.
And do you find that there are a cluster of components, so to speak, in your research with ENODO Global that triggers protests, mass protests?
Yes, that was a great question. So we just finished a series of analyses in different regions. So we wanted to demonstrate that the application or the tools and the approach and the methodology can be applied to different environments. So we looked at Morocco, the Dominican Republic, and India. So we looked at 3 different language environments, social environments, cultural environments, and information environments. And in 2 of the analyses, we were able to identify the factors that would lead to social unrest. And we actually went to the Dominican government and we went to the Moroccan government with our analysis and explained to them that they would see increased social unrest and protests within a certain time period. And those protests actually manifested in Santo Domingo. They had the largest protest to date, a couple 100,000 people over corruption issues. And in Morocco, they had protests in the Rif region, both of which we forecasted and predicted and went to the government and warned them about.
Excellent. And that's a pretty good cross-section that you got right there. You got basically the one of the MENA countries, Morocco, the Middle Eastern, North African, and you got the Asia and Hispanic. And
that's exactly why we did it. And then this analysis that we completed today, hopefully, is focused on St. Louis and the protests that were happening last week and this week. And we wanted to do a real-time analysis to watch how and understand the dynamics between online protesters and protesters on the street, to see what that relationship was, understand the linkages, and then understand how that impacted public perception and public sentiment. And it was really, we uncovered some very interesting things that will be out in the report.
Very good. And I'm assuming that you're not at liberty to discuss it at this time.
No, I'm actually happy to discuss it.
Oh, very good. Can you give us a little sneak preview?
Sure. So what we found was when events occurred on the ground. So, and I can give you like 2 specific examples. The first is the mayor. She scheduled a town hall meeting, and she canceled the town hall meeting. And by canceling it, when she canceled it, she put out a very lengthy message saying, "Here's why I canceled it." And the canceling of the town hall meeting coincided with the protest, day 2 or day 3 of the protest, and you saw an immediate backlash from online activists about the canceling of the town hall meeting. And then you saw a lot of narratives that came out on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook saying that the people were holding their town hall on the streets every day. So it was very powerful in seeing the narratives that came back and forth. The second one was when on night 3, police were called out to kind of quell some protests, and the police actually started chanting, not our streets. I forget what the actual chant, but anyway, it was about these are our streets, which created huge negative public sentiment and backlash. And so then what we were able to do is correlate specific events to public sentiment, and then show how the social media was amplifying or heightening social tensions and unrest, which was actually shaping the course of the protests.
Mm-hmm. We're hearing that narrative quite a bit these days in different arenas in our society, aren't we?
We are, and it's, I say that because it's depressing, because words without actions have no meaning. And what we're seeing is the catalyst or the action, either a verdict for, an individual to be, not charged on an event, or, these trigger events can't be forecasted. However, the public sentiment and the underlying social tensions can be addressed. And the frustrating part is what we've seen is city administrators, police are reactive. They're not proactive. And what we say is, they're mowing the lawn. They're not cutting. They're not killing the weeds. And our approach looks at and focuses on killing the weeds, looking at what those drivers of instability and security are before they become protest strikes, riots. And, even if you have a trigger event, you can manage that and mitigate the impact if you're doing the work on the front end.
And of course, you get the information, you gather it, and you present it to whoever is seeking this information. But the ways of approaching these issues, of course, are usually left up to the city leaders or whoever is in charge, whoever the people are who are in charge.
Yeah, I'll tell you, our greatest challenge is getting someone to listen. So when the protests first started in Baltimore, I reached out immediately to the mayor's office and to chief of police. When the protests happened in Ferguson, we did the same thing. When we reached out to city administrators, police leaders, mayor's office in Chicago, Baltimore, Ferguson, and now in St. Louis. And each time we're met with thanks, or the hubris that they can handle these things on their own, or we've never gotten responses back. So I've emailed, I've called their offices, and so when the protests happened in St. Louis, we decided that we were going to conduct a report to use that as a mechanism to engage with these different leaders to say, here's how we can help. But quite honestly, we've had no success engaging, because really they either are so caught up in the moment, or even after the fact, they're like, okay, it's over, it's done, that we don't, the problem's solved, that we don't need to address it. Whereas they're going to continue to face, increased social tensions, and trigger events will spark riots and protests more frequently in the future.
Very interesting. And the fact that the mayor did cancel the town hall meeting at the last minute, isn't this kind of a common, and I'm talking just in the political realm, this is kind of a common thing that's occurring today because of the pressure, and don't they immediately lose credibility?
Yeah, you're spot on. A lot of the tweets and hashtags that came out were Linda Liar, and it was really it focused on credibility as a huge issue on that, and that's part of the problem is the engagement strategies that these either political leaders or police are taking, which really amplify the negative sentiment instead of reducing the negative sentiment. How effective would it have been if the mayor went out on the streets that evening to talk to protesters or walk with protesters? And instead of having police in riot gear looking like militia or military, have them just cornering off or sectioning places where protesters could speak and handing out coffee and water and donuts. Instead of heightening the social tensions, what we do is we look at reducing the social tensions. And right now, everything that we're observing is met with criticism, heightens social tensions, and really amplifies negative sentiment.
And Jim, do you think that what's happening, I remember many years ago learning in one of my sociology classes that the government is usually 20 years behind the people. Do you think that is still true and that they're using the old approaches that are now archaic and outdated as to solving issues in our society?
Yes and no. There are some cities that are very sophisticated and integrate some of the cutting-edge technologies, and I mean, Baltimore works with several universities, and they provide studies and analysis. So not in general, and I don't want to discredit a lot of the great work that's being done by some cities, but I would agree that there are some municipalities and cities and that are behind the times when it comes to integrating capability to support their efforts.
Wonderful. Jim, you've had 23 years of experience in the United States Marine Corps Special Operations and Naval Intelligence, as well as holding a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Economics and a Master of Science degree in Strategic Intelligence. What would you say are the major skills from your military service that you've been able to transfer to the success of your company, ENODO Global, and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, that's great. A great question. I would say it's really from my traveling in different capacities in my jobs during the military. 3 tours in Afghanistan, deployments to Iraq, Ethiopia, I mean, all of the worst places in the world. And it was a great thing for me because I got to interact with different cultures and societies and people and individuals, which really allowed me to understand one important thing, which is, and what I bring to ENODO, we don't look at things through our worldview, our lens. We try to take a very objective approach and look at issues or topics through the lens of the population. So whenever asked, typical consultants will come in and sell you everything in the world and tell you they know everything. In our engagements, we go in and we talk with clients and we say, we don't know. And they're like, what do you mean you don't know? You guys are experts at this. And we're like, yes, we are experts at this. However, we do not, and we are not experts in this particular, environment or region. And the other thing we don't do is we don't hire subject matter experts in a particular region or language or anything like that, because they bring their worldviews and their logics of appropriateness and things like that, which really taint the analysis. So we take a very objective opinion and we apply data analytics to come up with solutions, and then we validate our solutions through individuals and through subject matter experts. So the big takeaway is it wasn't the schooling, it wasn't anything like that. It was really interacting with individuals and communities and cultures in different parts of the world.
Your immense background with diversity and that's a wonderful thing. And the fact that ENODO Global works from an objective point of view, which is one of the major components in doing mediation, in bringing people together.
Yeah, if you go in with your preconceived notions, you've already failed, and especially when you're looking for solutions, you can't back the police or back the city officials or back the activists or the protesters. You really have to be objective in your analysis and your findings and recommendations, and I think we do a very good job of it, and that's really what we pride ourselves on.
Beautiful. And we are running out of time, Jim, but is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know about this great work that ENODO Global is doing? And one other thing I wanted to add, do you think that it's just a matter of getting the word out, marketing ENODO Global? Because the work you're doing, I would think that every government entity in this country would want to at least be aware of this, and that you do have this great offer in this wonderful work.
Well, thanks, Susan. I don't want to use this as a tool to market ENODO, but I will say our greatest challenge has been access. We're supremely confident in our capabilities and our platforms and our capability and the methodology. It really is socializing the capability and having people really people in their comfort level, and they don't want to try something new. And really, what we're asking them to do is to remove themselves from their comfort zone and try something new, try something different. And that's our biggest challenge or hurdle. But once people see the results, then they're one from then on. So that's our greatest challenge. But we know over time that we will overcome that. And the other thing is we're not looking at success in monetary figures of how many contracts we sign. Our successes rated are based upon how we help communities, how we safeguard individuals or communities, and how we can stop protests or events like the things that happen in Chicago or Ferguson or Baltimore from reoccurring.
Very good. Jim, it has been an honor as always having you on the program. And if any of our listeners would like to know more about ENODO Global, where can they go?
Our website. Our website has all the information you need in different sectors, and it's www.enodoglobal.com. And everybody screws up the name ENODO, and I'll just tell you it's Latin origin, and it means to solve or to elucidate. And it's part of the idea behind ENODO is we solve complex social challenges that exist within today's society. So, and listen, I'm a big proponent. Anybody can call or email me anytime you want. My contact information is on the website, and it's very easy. Jim@enodoglobal.com.
Beautiful. And thank you so much. You're doing such great work, Jim, you and everyone over there at ENODO Global. And it was been an honor again having you as a very special guest on Pieces of Peace. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Susan. I hope your listeners enjoyed it and maybe learned something. And as always, it's an honor to be talking to you.
Okay. Bye now.
All right. Bye-bye.
My guest was Jim Cisco. He is the founder and president of ENODO Global. And you can contact Jim at ENODO. It's ENODO Global.com.